Hello, and welcome to another episode of TacoBytes, your Daily Bite of Degen, episode number 668, coming to you live from somewhere, nowhere. We're in Dallas, Texas today. We are live with Ken from Genius AI. Ken, you are an amazing individual. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. Hope you can hear me still. I had to change mics there real quick.
You sound perfectly clear and crisp. Man, happy Friday. How are you?
Yeah, happy Friday. I'm very good. I'm very good.
All right. I want to do a quick shout out to everyone joining us on LinkedIn, Player One Taco YouTube, 0xDegens YouTube, Twitch, Twitter video, Kick, Rumble, on-chain via Unlonely, and on-chain via Solana. Thanks, Filecoin, for being awesome. For those that are joining us in the Twitter space, we are live with Ken Hurley from Genius AI. As you can see, he is joining us on the board as the co-host, but the real magic is happening on video where you get to sort of see us talk out today. So on the Jumbotron is the link directly to the video if you want to watch us. If you want to hear us and you don't have the time, just listen in. Know the Genius account is up on stage, is muted because all of the audio is coming through our video. So now that pleasantries are out of the way, Ken.
How are you, Taco?
I am doing good. I love that painting on your back wall.
You love that? That's a brand new one, by the way. That's pretty cool.
Is that a microboard that I'm seeing there?
Yeah. It's a artistic chipset, basically, like an X-ray of a chipset or a PCB board. Yeah.
Nice. It's really hilarious when sometimes they will do artistic chipsets, as I like to say, but then it's like a city. It's actually like a cityscape or something, and it's really crazy. I've seen some cool overlays of like actual chip designs that people have overlaid on sort of city designs, and they line up.
That's pretty funny. It's
pretty cool. So, Ken, you have a huge community with the Genius AI community. I've known you, well, what about like just under a year, I would say, a little bit more, a little less.
Yeah, close to a year.
And so, you know, I think the first time we got to meet in person was at Permissionless last year.
Last year. Yeah.
You went heavy there, showcasing. You had like 50 devices there.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that
well, it wasn't quite 50. It was more like 10, but yeah, sure.
If you talk of like all the little phones you had PlayStations, you had like old devices, you had router, you had every GPU under the sun to try to
maybe it was 25,
to showcase what you were building and the compatibility of it. And so, we're gonna hop all over today. But why permissionless? As like, because was that your first major conference?
Yeah, it was our first major conference. It had to just basically aligned with kind of us getting it into a shape where we could actually kind of show it off a little bit. A real early alpha version of it, and just the different devices that we were working on to make it cross-platform. Because of course, that's my total goal there, is to make sure it's cross-platform between every device that has a GPU on it. Including IoT devices. And so we had little Raspberry Pis there, and an Xbox in developer mode that was running it, and, all these little NUCs, which are just little mini computers, and of course, iPhones and Android devices, and even an Android set-top box and all that. So every device that we could pull together to kind of show, hey, this works on this one and this one and this one, we basically were showcasing at Permissionless. And it was, the previous year Permissionless I had attended without a booth, and it was pretty good. But that year's Permissionless was a little smaller because everybody was off into there was conflicts with other shows and things like that. But our booth, I didn't mind, because our booth was like the most busy. Even OKX, which was next to us, which had a really big booth, was like two guys sitting there watching everybody come talk to us, right? And so I wasn't too disappointed in it, but it was still a very small show overall.
Yeah. And so I have to step up because I am the junior intern, the senior intern of permissionless. So I have some onus there. I love the entire permissionless team, Blockworks and what they do. Um, so I will say that the first year was in Miami, or was in West Palm Beach. That was a great time. Same sort of issue as permissionless 2. Like, they had amazing speakers, but they were all separate from there. And so that was the same thing, like you were saying. The Austin Convention Center is huge, so they had a ton of people there, but they had amazing speakers. So they were like off on the other side of the conference hall. But you were saying, having to deal with Korea Blockchain Week and Token 2049 at the same exact time. Companies had to pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's coming up again in I guess
October.
Yeah, October, and then at least it's in a different area that is where is it? It's not in
Salt Lake, Utah.
Salt Lake, yeah, Utah, yeah. So that may be pretty good because I've never been to Utah. I don't know if we're going to go to that one because we've kind of blown our budget this year in general, but we are going to Rare Evo in Las Vegas, and only because it's not too expensive and it's very close to home. So I'm definitely going to be going to that one. We're sponsoring that one. I think that's the last one we're going to do this year because I have other better conferences that are geared more towards what we're doing than just blockchain, because we're kind of talking at some very high end family office network kind of conferences, because that's really when our system is going after impact investing, basically, and making an impact more than just kind of blockchain and decentralized finance. So in general, we're trying to use the AI for impact, and impact investors are more keen on our project in that respect. So that's kind of the conferences we're trying to target for the rest of this year.
Yeah. And I want to get into some of that impact piece, because you have a lot of things. If I start to get into any territory that's not public knowledge yet, let me know. I don't want to like drop out too much alpha or but I'm going to go over a lot of stuff that you talked about at permissionless or at consensus, because that's the last time I got to see you in Austin last month, where you had a big booth and you were showcasing with graffiti as well.
Graffiti entertainment. Yeah.
And so it was a really cool time where you were sort of talking about like the distributed compute power that Genius sort of brings. And then at the same time, the access that you were going to have to the amount of GPUs. And so you talked about partnering with a telecom.
Yeah, that is public knowledge. So that's NextLogic. And we announced that. Basically, that was our first kind of very, very big I guess kind of user acquisition, but it's both partner and user acquisition, because they became a partner, but all their users of the devices become partners as well as customers for us. And it ended up, he said that NextLogic CEO was saying that they have a couple 100,000 of those set-top boxes out there. So once we launch on their platform, we'll instantly have a couple 100,000 GPU resources to do AI processing just from one company. And then we talked to a bunch of people at Consensus that have similar situations. And in fact, another big ISP out in the Philippines said they have a couple million users and they want to talk to us. And so we're kind of taking it slow, though, because we want to make sure that it scales correctly and everything works correctly with the test net before we go off and, bring on a couple million GPUs, instantly, and the system's brought to its knees because we haven't done our engineering correctly. And I'm pretty sure we have, but I like to test, and I'm kind of a secure person. I want to make sure that belt and suspenders type of thing to keep the pants up.
Yeah, no, and
anyway.
And so, like, I want to break this down just so that people can sort of understand and follow through if they're new to Genius and stuff. What you're sort of talking about is set-top boxes for cable that have an extra GPU in them, or not an extra, they have one GPU in them, but they're not really being used or stretched to their limits because they're for streaming videos. And so when they're not being used, basically this is a software update that adds your SDK to it. So your chain and your connection use is accessing it when it's not in use.
Yeah, and even when it's in use, because, well, when the GPU is not in use, for sure. But the set-top boxes, a lot of the different chipsets have what they call a video codec, a compression decompression chip. And so they are mostly there's some other ways to do this, but in general, most of them don't use the GPU hardly at all, just to display the graphics, and that's nothing compared to rendering a game or 3D graphics and stuff like that. And the chipsets have become very, very capable, even kind of what you would consider low end these days. Used to be very, very high end a couple of years ago with Qualcomm chipsets and these other all-win chipsets and all that have GPUs that operate pretty well for 3D games. But if they're not being used because you're doing video compression and decompression, and they have other chipsets that support that streaming side of thing in the set-top boxes, that is like the network chips that do the streaming, and they're all the ones at NextLogic, I'm told, are all connected with fiber optic over there in the Philippines, and it's 2 gigabit. So think about a 200,000 neural network connected with 2 gigabits of data. It's a pretty powerful small brain for you to do AI and machine learning stuff. I mean, it's not perfect because we have billions of neurons, but if you think about it kind of being this big brain, it's still pretty powerful. It's a good start. We're gonna have millions, or if not billions, of nodes in our network eventually. But this is a really good start for the first big, semi-big company that we've signed with.
Yeah, and so then the big question that people always ask: cool, you have GPUs. What are you doing with them?
Yeah. So the funny thing about that is that NextLogic can actually utilize the GPUs as well, because what they do is they have all these basketball games in these little communities, these poor communities that maybe have 7 to 10,000 people, but they're really big into basketball over there in the Philippines. And apparently it's like high school games, but it's all televised and streamed to all these households. And they have like 4 cameras, and they want to use the AI to pick which camera and track the ball during the game, because they can't have like 4 cameramen doing this, right? And they do use AI to basically do that. So not only are they providing the AI, they're using the AI, and then other people can use it too outside. If there's no basketball games going on, somebody from outside can do like retraining of Chat GPT models or any kind of large language models. They can do inference or retraining. They can do their own video streaming out to those guys, out to the Philippines, those 200 units, and turn around and bring it back in. So that's what I was talking about. It's kind of a unique business model for us, in the fact that, we're getting all of their customers as partners, but also as customers as well, because beyond just the streaming side and them using it for AI, anytime they're playing a game that has Genius involved, then they can use those Genius tokens also. So they become a customer, but they're also supplying the GPUs to do the blockchain side of things. And so it's a combination. The Super Genius blockchain is a combination of 2 blockchains. The Super Genius one is the transaction one that does AI and everything else. And then Genius kind of rolls up to the public blockchain. So we really do 2 things. We do regular blockchain work, or regular blockchain transactions like trading NFTs or trading tokens. And on top of that, we do AI and machine learning transactions, or we do rendering transactions. If your GPU is able to render a frame in a movie, then that's another transaction for us. So it's really just a big transaction network, if you will, kind of like a Visa transaction network, but with a commodity instead of cash, right? And the commodity, the real world asset, is GPU resources. So we're really kind of a commodity, a Visa MasterCard transaction processing for commodities, if you want to break it down into one sentence.
Yeah. So I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to paraphrase. A friend of mine, her name is Meta. She is the CTO of Casper Network. And we were having dinner 2 years ago, and that was when the question, how do we bring on the next billion people, started to become like the new key phrase. And she's like, I don't want to bring on 1 billion people. I want to bring on like 3 customers, and they're going to have a distributed network of people. And so in one fell swoop, you're bringing on 100,000 people into blockchain with one customer.
With one customer.
And so, and are you helping with Next develop how to distribute those tokens as well? Or are they going to be showing up as like bill credits? Or how are people going to be accessing their Genius tokens?
So in general, we haven't worked out all the details, but what I'm leaning towards is that NextLogic will have their own token, right? And so their own token could be even, it could have a parent token that's the Philippines token, and then there's NextLogic token, but it doesn't have to do that. So our contracts, our smart contracts are capable of having child tokens, and they all roll up through Genius eventually, which is nice. But NextLogic could have their own token, and they basically could sit there and pay out into the NextLogic token, or even a Philippine token, for instance. And then that token could be used for a multitude of reasons, like, I want to buy some groceries, or I want to trade it for, I want to buy some apples, but that person wants an in-game NFT. And so I basically give him, the NextLogic tokens, and he uses that to buy the apples. And then he sell me the apples, and then he turns around and uses that to buy his in-game NFT, right? So, and he could basically trade the NextLogic for the apples, turn around and convert that NextLogic into Genius tokens, turn around and buy graffiti tokens, all in the same transaction, and then buy in-game graffiti items. So it's all this. You got to think of Genius as kind of the parent or the reserve currency for the whole system, where it transacts on our Super Genius network back to, we're just a transaction network. And so all the transactions that happen like that, like on NextLogic, are really happening underneath the hood, behind the scenes, where you don't even know that it's really on the Super Genius network. And then you can extract that value out to other Genius enabled systems like Graffiti Games or anything like that, or you can extract that further out into fiat currencies like Ethereum, through Ethereum and through Bitcoin, and out to the local currency of your choice. We kind of want to shy away from that part of it, just because that then starts to involve gas fees and other high fees and things like that, where we're trying to reduce the fees to near zero, with just a little bit to support the network, and that's about it for that. So it kind of is this great ecosystem where it distributes localized tokens, but it's still really like a derivative of the Genius token itself.
Okay. And so then all of these ecosystems come back and benefit the utility token Genius. And so, yeah.
So
and on top of that, you're switching other utility tokens out for other utility tokens. It's sort of like they're derivatives that all then trade back through Genius. So the Genius network and the Genius utility token really gets used.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, that all, like I said, we're just a big transaction network, and it would be like being a transaction network, and we're like Visa, but somebody wants to start MasterCard, but it's still going through our transaction network, right? That's kind of the philosophy a little bit. But what ends up happening is, again, it's all commodity based. So what the benefit of that, if you run through our system, is we have been very adamant about making sure that we were a utility token for security, for compliance reasons, right? And if you're a derivative of a commodity, you're a commodity. You can't take gold. Gold is a commodity, a great example, right? You can't take gold, 100 ounces of gold, and scrape off, 1 ounce of gold and call it like a 1 ounce gold coin and sit there and say, oh, well, that's now a security, right? Because it's a derivative of a commodity. And that's kind of how I try to explain to people that the real world asset is the GPU compute resources. You got to kind of treat that as gold and scarcity, and scarcity drives the price up of the commodity. And we have scarcity mechanisms built into our token, which is kind of cool too.
Yeah, having both the faucets and the sinks, so to speak, how they're created by using the network, processing transactions, doing work, and then, you know, spending and burning mechanisms, that the sync part, you know, keeps that inflation rate in check, but also gives the reason to use the token rather than just collect and hoard. So it's a really cool, those are some cool mechanic pieces. You were talking about impact funding and stuff like that. So there's a conference coming up at the end of July, near the end of July in Rhode Island, Opal.
Yeah. Opal is, you know, we're going out to that. I'm personally going out to that to talk, because what ended up happening was a lot of really high-end, high net worth individuals are very interested in crypto, but they don't want to get involved because of all the scams going on. So they were looking for somebody that, you know, has been around for a while and is a technologist, and believe it or not, they were talking about being in Silicon Valley too, and, you know, just somebody that's been around the block that's not going to, you know, basically come in and take money and scam them and things like that. They really want to get into blockchain, right? And they're very interested in it. And they're also interested in games, because a lot of these high net worth individuals have kids and grandkids that are playing games, right? And so they were really excited, because I've been in both industries, right? I was in the gaming industry for a long time. I worked at Google, I worked at Amazon, I worked in NVIDIA. So they're like, okay, well, here's a guy been around the block, you know, isn't going anywhere. He's actually going to build a real project. Is probably building a real project. We want to talk to him. So I got all these meetings set up to go out there and talk in front of them. But in general, what I figured out with the help of an advisor was a lot of these big, large family offices and high net worth individuals are doing impact investing. And what that is they'll make investments that'll take 10 years with some extensions to make huge impacts in low income, you know, countries or communities and things like that. But they expect a return on their investment, but it usually takes 10 years. And what I realized was our system is really has an impact mechanism to it, right? If you think about it, if the people in Africa are playing our games, right, and they're providing AI and they're getting paid out, it's having an impact on their life. And this, we talked with the Philippines, the Next Logic people about this, and they said, yeah, when we gave them technology, the set-top boxes that were like $25, their income doubled from $100 a month to like $200 a month, because they were able to access the internet, sell their goods like in a Shopify-like thing. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting, because the AI stuff, if they're going to get paid out, you know, they may get triple their income now. So we're benefiting. You know, we're distributing the AI processing payments to everybody else besides the incumbents, you know, the centralized cloud services and things like that. And I won't mention any names, but you know all who they are. And so instead of sending the payments to them, we're sending the payments to the world of the people that own the GPUs. And so we're increasing the benefits they have in life and just their life experiences, because now they can play games, earn that money, turn around and use that money to buy food. Like I was talking about, where they could trade it for, you know, food in the Philippines. But they can also, in Africa, they all have phones, but they don't have credit cards. Now they can use this to basically pay, to transfer it to whatever currency somebody wants. Just by playing the game, they're earning it. So they have a way to earn it without having to play a game and kind of pound on a game and spend a lot of time. Or they can earn it while they're sleeping, turn around and use that to go to the doctor, right? And pay the doctor in those tokens, in Bitcoin or whatever. So it really has an impact. And the impact investors were kind of excited about that, because normally what they do is they have a lot of philanthropy, and they'll throw, you know, 10, 20, $100 million sometimes at these philanthropies, and they have no way of knowing if it's having an impact, right? Mm-hmm. Now we know how it can have an impact. And we figured out even further that we can take IoT devices. If, like, one of them was talking about the impact on water, how pure water is around the world, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a fly fisherman. So he wanted to know, he threw money at it, and he just doesn't know, you know, if anything's happening. And we figured out, hey, we could take some IoT devices, put them out and measure the water, turn around and use the AI devices or the IoT devices to do AI for machine learning to measure your impact. And so now what we've come to realize is that we have a way for all these guys, these high net worth individual and family offices to accelerate the impact, measure the impact, and really have a way wider impact around the world with our technology, because it can use the IoT devices for both AI, and it introduces AI into their impact investing to be able to speed it up, advance it, measure it. And so it opens up a whole new world for us. And they're really excited about it, which is kind of cool. So I'm looking to talk to them about making these impact areas under Genius, so you could have some kind of impact, like the water guy. We could have some kind of impact water token, right? And now you get, okay, we put out IoT devices on there, and now you can measure that, and now you pay out in your impact water token to these people, who can then turn around, convert that into money, and go to health, go see their doctor or buy food and stuff like that. So I think it's really blown up into this great system. I've wanted this to be AI for good. That was my whole intention, right? And originally it was like, hey, if I cure cancer or something like that, I'm good for the rest of my life. I've had a great impact. But it ended up, we just kind of figured out, wow, this thing can actually have impacts in just about any area you can think of that can leverage AI. And so I'm like, oh, this is great. So we're kind of building out these vertical markets, and we may have to scale a bunch of people to basically handle those different, impact investment markets. But again, that'll all roll up to Genius, which is even nicer.
Yeah. And so I want to roll back on a little bit of things, because some of the things, without further explanation, scares people as a repeat of like the last cycle, especially around gameplay. So one of the things that you talked about, like playing games, like we're not talking play to earn here specifically, where it's a Web3 game and someone has to go buy a token and an NFT. People don't have to buy anything, because I'm going to do a butchery job of explaining it. You fix my explanation. But what you are is an SDK, basically a couple lines of JavaScript that gets added to any game that's currently out there, whether it's Clash of Clans or some other maybe demonetized game that's looking for a way to, but already has a community of players.
Yeah.
And so when someone's playing this game on their phone, Genius is just running in the background at like 5 to 10% more battery power than normal. And so you're using that excess space that's being used in the background of a regular Web 2 game or Bubble Witch or anything else that is being played. So they're not even playing a Web 3 game, and they're supporting the blockchain. Or someone's watching TV, and that excess little, TV power is being used to run the blockchain and run transactions, run computation, run math, basically. And that's because they're providing to the network, they're getting a reward. And that reward might be minute, but it adds up because it's running every second that they're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be really small, but if you do 1 billion transactions a day, even at 0.0001 of a penny, it adds up, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of our goal, is to just the massive amount of transactions that we could have. So 2 clarifications. We're not to a point where we're actually going to go after Web 2 to Web 3 games with the JavaScript side of things, because that is very hard to access a GPU over your browser and browser games in JavaScript. And it is no lines of code actually to integrate, but it's usually in game engines like Unity and Unreal. So real games, not Web 2, Web 3 games, which is a whole nother animal.
I'm talking about downloaded games that like I've gone to the Google Play Store and I've downloaded. That way it's an install or an APK. So it's something I've downloaded. Like you said, not a web browser game, not a flash game,
Yeah.
But
and so JavaScript, and there is no code. We basically, there's a link, which means you basically say, hey, add this SDK. And SDK stands for Software Development Kit, basically. And what that means is that you just basically say, hey, add this to my game, And that's like one line in what's called a link file or a CMake file that basically says, link them together, right? And there's no coding involved. And then it says, okay, I'm now linked to this game with a configuration that says, hey, do AI and pay out in this particular token and split it this particular way. And so it's just a config file that you make up. And then if you create your own token, it's another form that you fill out. And so, yeah, it's disruption in the fact that we don't require that the game try to integrate or figure out how to work within blockchain. And it's completely opaque, I guess, not transparent. It's opaque from the user or hidden from the user and the game developer to the extent that they want it. If they really want to create an NFT, then they have to make a call, but they're still not tying. One of the things I was very adamant about was decoupling the tokenomics from a blockchain and the economics, the game economics. Because what ends up happening is when you try to tie those two together, you mess up the game, right? And you mess up the fun of the game because you're constantly trying to monetize based on two different economic systems, right? And whether or not it's, bringing in, and it's just so annoying to the user to have to set up a wallet and buy the token. And so what we said was, we're going to reduce this to zero friction, right? So the user doesn't have to do any of that, right, in the game. And we figured out that actually it ended up alleviating the need for game developers to put ads or figure out how to monetize. So we actually we went to zero friction in integration, and then we reduced other friction in other areas for the game developer. So we call it negative friction monetization, because we've actually solved some other problems that you had and able to monetize your game. Now we are working back to the JavaScript. I just want to mention that we are looking at that on ways to do that. And there may be a way to play it through your browser as well, if we can get access to the compute infrastructure through the browser. And there has been some work on that recently, but we don't know if it's in a state to actually do that yet. And that's the only reason we're not doing browser-based games yet. It all has to be a on-device downloaded.
Yep. Yeah. And I use JavaScript just because I particularly one project that I know. Different games are written in different things, whether it's in Unity or an Unreal Engine. But there's some really cool pieces there, because people are contributing to a network, and you've made it in a way to where games that already have communities or diehard players, it doesn't, it can be running in the background of it, and it can be the revenue stream of that one billionth of a penny, but it could be 0.001 genius token, can be split between like the developer, the dev, and the users at the same time, so that if the game's not monetized and there's no microtransactions, the developer can eventually earn enough to pay for like a new build update, and teams aren't relying on the users to pay for the next build type of thing. And users, and so then at the same time, if there are microtransactions, users could earn up some credits that, pay for, basically you're buying time in games these days. You don't want to wait for a build process or something. You're just basically buying time, and you don't want to sit and grind out something. Like, I've been playing Clash of Clans now, 11 years.
All right.
And I first started working for Clash of Clans for Supercell in 2015. And so I'm gonna so for those that don't know who I am, I'm Player One Taco. Hello. And I've been in Web3 since about 2012 when I started as a Bitcoin miner. I started gaming in 2008, and I couldn't figure out what my name would be, and so I press enter, and the null and void back then was Player One. So I carried over Player One into Ace Combat 4, a lot of different competitions, to the point to where I had to start typing it in because that's what people knew me as. When I started working at Supercell as a community dev liaison for Clash of Clans, I became Player One Clash, and then I went to EA for Command and Conquer Rivals. Same thing. Community dev liaison. I became Player One Rival. Then I helped start up Taco Cat, and I became Player One Taco, and that just sort of fit like a pair of socks that you love. So now everyone calls me Taco. But that gives me a quick little run back of who I am. I've been playing games since my very first computer in the 1990. Oh my God. Yeah. But, you know, so that is sort of, you know, the brief history of Player One Taco. Started creating content in 2018, and obviously now here we are in TacoBytes after many different shows with our 668th episode with Ken from Genius. And so, Ken, one of the couple of things that I wanted to sort of touch on, the game development side of things, it's like you're separating where a lot of people are like making these AAA games, having a hard way of instituting blockchain, where blockchain is just like, oh, you know, you have an NFT, so it gives you a skin or power-ups, but the rest of the game isn't ran on blockchain because that's too many transactions to, you know, and you don't want to have to like give an approval all, because who knows what could happen then. But then at the same time, the account abstraction has sort of reduced a lot of the friction, where someone's just signing up for an account, they magically have a wallet and they don't even know, you know. But you're also talking about that gasless transaction side of things, which sort of helps bring it to a really easy user base, to where they don't even need to know they're on blockchain. They just know like, oh, I'm playing my game and my game's paying me a little bit of in-game currency for free just for playing, you know. And it might be double what they know, like the game normally gives away for free or something like that. But they're getting a financial piece from playing a game. And you were just at, this is, I've said this a few times and I'm sad, this is the first year I've missed GDC in a while. And you were there, you had a booth, and you said you had like great exposure. You had like, what, like 1,000 games or 1,000 interest points sign up to learn more and like see how you could integrate?
2,000 people signed up right after GDC, basically.
2,000.
Yeah, 2,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really you know, preaching out there, you know, and basically getting the word out about how this system works and what it's attempting to accomplish, or what it will accomplish and what it's on track to accomplish. And coming from the gaming industry myself, right, and then getting into blockchain, I was very disappointed with, you know, things like Immutable X, where, you know, only a very, very small percentage of the games are going to want to integrate, because it's just costly, right? It's like you have to take your resources, a couple weeks, figure out how the economics. And then I saw all these people writing these games and these blockchain games, and I would go play them and I'm like, this game sucks. You know, I don't like this game at all. And I played games too. Like, yeah, I played Clash of Clans too for a couple of years, right? I played a bunch of them. I mean, I played a lot of games. I mean, you know, since the early 80s. That's how I got started. Playing arcade games like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and Tron, you know, and everything else, Space Ace and all those games back in the day. So I'm definitely a gamer myself. I don't play a lot anymore, but I still do. I still play them. You know, I'll fire them up and see if it's a good game and get hooked on it. Like I played Zelda, you know, on the Switch. Mm-hmm. So that's probably my most recent one. But in general, I just got, you know, my background being in games and writing a bunch for the last, you know, hundreds of years. Basically, I saw that there was a need to reduce the friction down to zero, because that's how I would want it as a game developer. And I couldn't handle how everybody else was trying to say, hey, look, we're a blockchain company. We know how you can integrate into your games. And that's why all the traditional game developers were like, you know, go away. You know, you're trying to tell us how to make a game, and you're just basically interfering with us trying to get a good game out there. And we have our monetizations. So those are the high end ones. Then everybody else was like, well, I can't afford to spend 2 to 3 weeks on a bet that I'm going to be able to monetize on Immutable X, for instance, right? That means I still have to go out and get players and paid players to somehow buy the NFT or buy the token and integrate my token into my game, figure out how to monetize it, advertise, do all that stuff. And I was like, we got to take that out of the picture. My goal was to kill advertising too, because in various reasons, but you got to just take out the friction and reduce it down to zero. And then, like you said, I only need like a couple. I have Graffiti Entertainment. They have 100 games. And if they only had 100 players on each of those 100 games, now I have 10,000 nodes in my network. That's all I'm after. And they have 10,000 people, right, that they're monetizing. If that's the average instant players that are on their game at any time is 100, they're monetizing 10,000 players, dynamic players. It could be 100 from here and 100 from there that kind of mix in and out. It's the dynamic players and the dynamic players that are coming in and out. So it's not daily active users. It's like active users at any given time is being monetized. And so that's unheard of, because you have to figure out how to find the people that are willing to give you money in a game, like my wife, right, who gets fed up with watching ads, and you entice her with the Halloween pack for a certain game, and she spends $30, and I'm like, why are you spending $600 a year on this really dumb game? Right? So yeah,
my mom plays a version of Bubble Witch. I don't know which one it is, but blockchain games are just not. They're all trying to be AAA studio games to like get players that like stream nonstop, where a lot of people are just looking for like that 1 to 3 minute like brain dump, like my one of my favorite Web3 mobile games right now is Blast Royale. It's just standing man, last man standing, kill 10 other players or 9 other players as quickly as possible as the map gets smaller and smaller. Pick up some cool power-ups. But what's really cool is they made like both a Web 2 version, and then if you want the Web 3 version, you have to go online to the Blast Hub and stuff like that. So that way they can not circumvent, but like that way they're not a Web 3 game, but you could get those Web 3 power-ups if you want. You want an actual NFT of the helmet that you're wearing,
Right.
And so to prove to people that I am still a clasher, because someone had said, prove you're a clasher still. I am bringing up my Clash of Clans, Player One Taco. Oh, that's such a horrible view of a camera. I apologize. But I'm still a war champ. Huge shout out to the war champions. We have been clashing for a minute. And but this is one of those things where everyone wants to try to make this like, I haven't even seen a good battle chess in Web3 yet. Like there was a couple different chess games, and stuff like that. And like, but no one's made us like, everyone went through for like, they're at the pixelated stage. And then everyone wants to go to, IRL metaverse play gaming. And I'm like, there's 1,000 steps in between. Get me a good text prompt game. But we see some AI stuff doing text prompt games now, which is really cool. And even like some of the text prompt games within Farcaster, which are super fun. Just like, it's like the simple little journey dungeon master type of stuff, that I want to see. Everyone thinks technology today equals technology from yesterday, but like there's a growing pains in all of it. And I think we're going through that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely when blockchain got introduced, there's a lot of growing pains for sure. And look, I mean, I'm not bad mouthing, any of the other people that are doing kind of similar stuff to get gaming into the blockchain, right? I mean, there's room for all of us. They're focusing more on the, 0.01% of the people that actually make money in the high-end AAA games. And like you said earlier, we're just after anybody and everybody that wants to monetize their game. We don't care what your game is. We don't care what your application is. We're just offering kind of the SDK to help you build whatever you want to build, instead of having to fight to try to figure out how to monetize and, survive and keep building games, right? And that's the thing, is a lot of indie developers make a game and then they make up $0, and then they're like, either they have to go work for somebody and they can't concentrate on the next game in order to pay, buy food and stuff like that. And we're hoping to make it where, hey, you can actually, every game that you do, make enough money or a little bit of money to pay. Maybe the first game you pay for 10%, and then you make 10 games and now you're 100% paid for, and you no longer have to go to work for somebody to buy food and pay your electricity, right? That's kind of the goal, is to let people, do that. But there's room for all of us in here. I just have, I'm going after everybody else that not the EAs and not the, Epics and all that, because they have their stuff figured out and their marketing figured out and their monetization figured out. But everybody else, can't compete. And now we're not really competing. It's like, okay, that space is that space for the, really high-end hardcore gamers, right? And now our space is for everybody else that, wants to make a casual game, that doesn't really want to figure out how to market and monetize their game. They just want to make fun games for people.
Yeah. Now, like you touched on something that I don't want to say near, like, because I haven't gotten to visit that part of MENA yet, of North Africa and stuff, but I have a lot of gaming ties to Africa and stuff like that. And like some of my friends, like Chike and stuff, they run what was originally known as Africa's largest gaming guild. Now it's like, now they rebranded to Gamic. Like they added internet to, like, I think around 75,000 homes, because like it was under like the Axie model last cycle. And they have different play to earn mechanics and dashboards with different Web3 games, where they had like, 70% of the revenue went to the player. 20% went to the DAO, 5% went to the team, and then 5% went to the asset that was being loaned out to the player. And so that 5% would then eventually pay for the initial deposit, to own that asset for that player. And then they could either then have that asset 100% theirs and play, or they could loan that back into the system, so someone else, so that they could get a little bit of that revenue as well. That's a distribution from the DAO. But you're adding another layer on top of that. So even this could happen. Like there could be, you're gonna hate me for saying, there could be SDKs on top of SDKs, because one of the things you talked about was getting rid of ads. Ads are annoying watch this ad to, get this lotto box, or, get another life. Nodal has the same thing, where they're playing low energy Bluetooth in the background, counting IoT devices. I think like 95% of their traffic is just searching for air tags. That's like one of their contracts. So they're just their SDK is just searching for air tags, and people are getting paid because the idea is we can just run in the background, and you're earning enough that you don't have to run ads for your consumers. Not making huge bucks, but you're making that bare minimum, so you don't have to run ads at least.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing for us is that if you think about it, it's really, everybody concentrates on, well, how much money can I make, right? And it's all in terms of usually in US dollars. And for us, it's like, no, what you're getting is digital assets, and you're getting something of value, and don't translate that into US dollars, right? Because that's where you start to really get kind of sidetracked, because it's like, okay, you have an NFT, and like normally in US dollars, if you want to say that, it's 99 cents, right, for an in-game item. Okay, who cares if you get it for 0.00001 of a genius token, right? And then you're like, well, how much am I earning in US dollars? Well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you're getting it for genius tokens. You're not getting it for US dollars. Now that 0.001 of a genius token, yes, can be mapped to US dollars if you want it, but instead it's the perceived value you're getting for the NFT. who cares what it is in US dollars, because that genius can turn around and be given to somebody else, or that NFT can be sold for US dollars eventually. But that genius token can be sit there and buy one apple, for instance. So you got to take dollars out of the equation. Everybody's like, well, how much can I earn if I do this? Well, it doesn't matter, because if you can trade the genius token, you can earn genius tokens. Yeah, it has a dollar value somewhere, but if you have a deflationary token like we have, it could sit there and say, okay, well, today that 0.001 of a genius token is worth $1, but in a month from now, it could be worth $500 because of deflationary, nature, or in 1 year. So you can't really say, how much am I going to earn? Well, you're going to earn in genius tokens. So I can't tell you today or tomorrow what that's going to be in US dollars, but I can tell you more than likely it's going to be more than it is today. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to say to people that
And
are
it's a
just
utility token. So we can't really talk too much about speculation on it, because there isn't really speculation with a utility token. But originally, like Genius, and we could pull up the charts if I wanted to, but I don't really want to, because one of the things that the token launched at around $2, and because of the limited supply, quickly ran up to around $10, then ran all the way up to like $180 before tokens were distributed and stuff like that. And then, ran up to $180 a token, and then, as people collected them and they're like, wow, I got this token for providing compute, that their ROI, they're like, I'm not worried about my electrical bill. Let's just cash out. And then, and now a token's sitting around $4, but like, that's still, higher than you launched at,
Yeah. We launched at 150. Yeah.
And $1.50, and now you're sitting at $4 something.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is you have to, the speculators are all about, dollars, right? And you have to think this is a utility token. Also think about commodities, right? The price will go up. It's because if you have gold, right, it's set at some value, right? It's like 2,300 right now. But if you take and you have 1 ounce of it, so you have $2,300. But if you take a slice of that off, right, and you use it, you put it in electronics, but those electronics aren't recyclable, right? And it's burned, like a burn, then you're left with less gold, and the price is going to go up because it's more of a scarce resource to use in electronics. Same thing with genius. There's less genius because of the burn mechanisms, because then to do compute of that asset. And so the growth of the price is based on the usage of the commodity and not speculation. And so that's why I keep telling people, stop worrying about short-term gains and the speculative part of this, because when we start these transactions up, this thing's going to go through the roof, because we're going to start using that commodity. Now, we have ability to slow down its growth, of course, but we would never go to a point where we mint so many new tokens that we're going to reverse the deflationary nature of the token, right? And so we would slow down the growth only so that the resource is more widely available. It would be like mining more gold. Are we going to put money into mining more gold so that we have that scarce commodity? Well, yes, maybe. It depends on the price, right? If the price is $2,300 for gold, you're going to probably go out and mine gold because it's worth it, right? To do that and add some more so that the price doesn't go to $5,000 and people are able to use it. So it's the same kind of mechanisms in the genius tokenomics.
Yeah. And you were talking about the scarcity of things, and as the example you're using, shaving off from a bar, like an ounce of gold, but as the price of gold goes up, that no longer an ounce stays roughly the same, but you have less and less gold because you're using it and stuff like that. And so that's that sink function that you're talking about. Yeah. But on the utility side of things, it's very, right now people are, and I hate using this term because I feel like it's part of our Web3 lexicon that's sort of like holier than thou. Like, what other community environment uses the term fiat.
I guess, yeah, I think it is used somewhere else in trading, in commodity trading, or what do they call that when they're trading currencies?
Forex.
Yeah.
So Forex trading, does use, but that in itself is a subsect of people that no one else, like, they're like, what are you talking about? But when the intrinsic value. So as you were talking, you said, 0.01 genius token could equal one apple today, but in, a year from now, it could be worth 500 apples. And it's so getting rid of that middle layer and that direct intrinsic value. So like knowing what a genius token is worth or what I'm able to get with it. And it's really easy because everything has a price sticker. You walk in a store, it's in dollars and cents. I know that, this is 2 for $5 at 7-Eleven. So yes, I do buy $5 worth. But right now, that's also equivalent of like 0.97 genius tokens.
All right.
Because I do quick math on that, that's sort of an easy pickup for me. But I'm not really thinking of this in genius tokens. I might think of this in Sol or ETH if I really want to be, if I really want to do hard math, but it's because it's the association that's so quick for a lot of people. And you're talking about removing that middle layer, because what we have to work on too, on the other side of it, is getting, merchants to be able to get it, as well. So it's one of those weird things.
I don't think it's too hard to do in certain countries because they don't think in terms of US dollars, right? Mm-hmm. They think it's almost like a barter system, really. Yeah. Right. And maybe genius stays at 0.001 genius for an apple. But yeah, it wouldn't, because it can be converted to US dollars, right? I mean, that's part of the decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges. It's intrinsic value per token. But yeah, in general, I think that the trade-off is, or the part that is missing is, like, if the apple is now 500 apples for 0.001 of a genius, or the other way around, so is the NFT, right? Yep. And so you're trading, it's more like, hey, I have this NFT and it's going to buy me one apple, right? In the future, yeah, that one NFT is still going to buy you one apple, even though that one FT might be $500 and the apple might be $500. In terms of genius tokens, it doesn't really matter. Because it's deflationary, and it's probably the other way around. It's not like the apple would be $500 and genius, for one genius, it'd be more like, no, it's still 0.0. Or if genius is $500 a token instead of $5 a token, then the apple would be 1/100th the price in genius tokens, right? So it's almost like a stable coin, almost, but it has a deflationary nature. It's the opposite of the US dollar inflationary side of things. Yeah. Right. That NFT is still going to buy you one apple a year from now, type of thing, because
it's like a forever stamp.
Yeah, it's like a forever stamp, really.
And for those not in the US, a forever stamp is, and I'm sure other countries have forever stamps too, where I could have bought the stamp 10 years ago, and it's a first class stamp at, I think 10 years ago, I think stamps were like 49 cents. And now, they're 63 cents or something like that, or 68. That forever stamp will always buy me one first class mail piece. And so, you're almost talking about forever commodities, forever apples. This NFT will always get me one apple, and unfortunately, even if the price of apples go down, it's still worth one apple. If apples go up, it's still worth one apple. And so,
okay, but see, that's the point. Is you just said apples will go up in relation to what? The US dollar?
Yeah, or whatever local currency
won't.
Yeah, and as we were talking about Africa, what's really cool uh, uh, and what was really cool is that like Nigeria has is one of the largest peer-to-peer infrastructures on crypto payments, blockchain payments for peer-to-peer transactions. Why? Because their inflation rate is so high that even what the cost of something in the morning, it is completely different in the afternoon. And so bartering happens a lot, and it happened at such a large scale that the Nigerian government, or a sect of the Nigerian government, got so frustrated that they invited Binance to come fix it, and then kidnapped them and held them hostage, and tried to shake them down, Binance down for a bunch of money, because their dollar is so has such a huge inflation rate that they felt that Bitcoin was the problem, that people had stability to look at it. I want to take a quick second, and I just want to shout out to everyone that is joining us on Twitter video, YouTube, and LinkedIn, as well as the Twitter space. If you guys have any questions, if you're on YouTube, Twitch, or please type them in. If you're on LinkedIn, unfortunately, I cannot see those questions at this moment because LinkedIn doesn't have a chat plugin yet. But if you're in the Twitter space, drop a comment if you have any questions for Ken. I did drop the Git book. So if you want to read more documents about Genius and see what Ken is building, I do want to shout out to Big A, as well as Pika for some of their cool comments and support. And then I have to apologize to Disclosure Crypto. No, I am not looking at Gari Network today. I will set aside, I told you, I will set aside time specifically for Gari Network. Today it is Genius. So yes. But one of the things, Ken, how big, let's talk about you. What's your you've talked of some providence on game development and blockchain. Where'd you go to college at, Ken?
Okay, well, so kind of funny. This is a hilarious story. I don't know that I've ever told this. In high school, I flunked out of computer science in 2 weeks, by the way. And I'm going to age myself here because it was on a PDP 11. So probably nobody knows what that is. 1981 was the year. All right. My computer science teacher came to me and said, after 2 weeks, he was trying to teach me binary, which is one of the most simplest things in the world when it comes to computer science, ones and zeros. And he just could not figure out how to educate me on how that turned into a number, right? Today, after I taught myself, it's like, that is so easy to explain, right? Two's complement. He just kept saying two's complement, and you just add them up, and he was doing all this math stuff, and I just wasn't getting it because I'm a visual learner, right? If you just put a formula in front of me, it doesn't work. And so anyway, he says to me, I think you need to, I'm going to flunk you out of my class right now. You're just not getting it. And I don't think you're going to pass the class. I said, well, I really want to get into computers. I think I like this kind of stuff. And I said, but what kind of job could I do? And he goes like this. And I don't know if you can see this. He goes like this. You should go do this. And I'm like, what? And then it dawned on me. I was in Oregon at the time, in Salem, Oregon. And in Oregon, you don't pump your own gas. There's gas station attendants that pump your gas for you. So he's telling me to go become a gas station attendant. That's how dumb he thought I was. So anyway, my friend basically bought a VIC-20 at the time. This is a predecessor to the Commodore 64 because we were at the arcades. He said, hey, you seem like you want to get into computers. Why don't you start looking at this? And so I started hacking on a VIC-20 to figure out how they worked and taught myself binary and basic and peeks and pokes and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I went to Oregon State University for electrical engineering degree. And when I got there, I had already been working on Apple computers and figured out how to do games and stuff like that and writing Apple computer stuff. And the Atari ST was coming out at the same time, or a little bit later than that. But I went and they were teaching tubes in electrical engineering, the tubes that you'd stick in old computers and amplifiers and stuff like that, and Fortran. And I looked at Fortran, and I had done assembly language in Pascal and and some C at the time, and I looked at Fortran and I'm like, oh, that is so ugly. I can't even, what are they doing? And it's all mathematics and all this weird stuff. I said, there's no way. So I dropped out of college, basically. And then I went to a couple community college classes and got on an Apple II, and the guys were doing games in there at the time. And this was like 1983. And I'm like looking at them and I'm like, oh, how are you doing that? And they introduced me to assembly language and the Big Mac assembler and all that. So I actually dropped out of college and taught myself computer engineering and software engineering for many, many years. And then I went back and got my computer science degree at the University of Maryland University College and challenged almost 100% of the courses about 20 years later.
At least you didn't bring up COBOL.
What's that?
At least you didn't bring up COBOL.
Well, so when I was at Chemeketa Community College, I was in the other section and they were doing COBOL and the punch cards. And I'm like, I'm not touching that. I got this, mini Apple that I could just sit there and type on. I'm not going to, what's this punch card thing? And then this big printout of all this code and this very formatted. And I was like, I didn't like the looks of COBOL either, right? Assembly language kind of looks like COBOL a little bit. Yeah. At least I understand assembly language because it's actually, because of being an electrical engineer and understanding how chips were built and all that stuff, I kind of knew the code and what the code was trying to do after I learned binary, of course, right? Because binary turns into the opcodes of the machine, of the CPU. So that's kind of how I did that. And then I kind of did the same thing with the public company or my one of the companies I started. I took it public and got up to speed on, how to basically be an MBA. And then I went back in 2015 and got my MBA because same thing, 10 years out there running a company in a public company, knowing how to do all the MBA stuff. I'm like, well, heck, I just better get that, piece of paper on the wall to prove to everybody I actually know what I'm talking about. Because everybody asked, where'd you go to school? What kind of degree do you have? And it's like, look, I'm an autodidact. I taught myself everything. You want me to prove that I actually have the same knowledge as somebody that went to college? Okay, I'll go challenge all the courses. Here you go. Here's my piece of paper showing. Here's my certificate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I went about educating myself.
Okay. And so that's the education side. What's the game side?
Well, that's back, like I said, when I walked into the Apple II and Chemeketa Community College and they were doing games. This guy was doing Qbert for the Apple I, and Sierra Online was interested in having him come work for him. And I did this game. I started doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, this is cool. How do you do these graphics? They were kind of educating me and turning me on how to assembler worked on the Apple II. And I wrote a game called Harvey that was based off of Jimmy Stewart's old movie with a 6-foot invisible rabbit, right? That was a friend. And the rabbit was actually trying to save Jimmy Stewart. He was in the insane asylum running around, open the doors, trying to find Jimmy Stewart. And then they'd take him up to the top and they'd fly away in a helicopter and he'd save Jimmy Stewart. Really simple, dumb game, but it just got me excited because people were like, oh, that's so cool, the graphics, blah, blah, blah. And that got me hooked. And then I did up a demo on the Atari ST and I wrote shape icon editor with graphics, taught myself how graphics work. And then I got approached by Activision to do Rampage for the PC and the Amiga and the Apple II. And so I personally wrote all those, went to the arcade, we filmed the arcade game, and then I basically coded everything for the IBM PC and the Amiga and duplicated the game, basically ported the game. And I did all the coding myself. And then I had one artist friend of mine. And so together we basically did those 3 versions of Rampage back in the day. And then it just kind of spiraled from there, working at Electronic Arts, working on Chuck Yeager's or Combat Simulator. Go look at Moby Games. You'll see about 20 games on there. It's missing a few, but the early on I was doing software engineering on it, but then I, running a public company and having my company, I did a lot of executive producer, but I still code to this day because I love developing things that people look at and go, oh, that's cool. And I mean, Genius is that way, right? Yeah. Genius is all like, well, this is really cool with game developers. And I love, the fact that you're giving back an impact. And so that's kind of how I got into games. But it was mainly for me playing arcade games and us spending a lot of quarters during the summer. And my friend going, hey, there's this $300 computer we could buy instead of spending $600 at the arcade. Why don't you make us some games? And that kind of was the genesis of my kind of gaming career.
So for me on the Apple II, Hyperstack. Do you remember Hyperstack? It was like the
Yeah.
early PowerPoint. That's
Yeah.
where I started to build my first games as quest games,
Right.
object oriented and text based, so where people could sort of design their own quest.
Yep.
TI-83 plus,
Yeah.
building out games. Like I started off with like text, building out off of like, Mafia Wars, and like, those, choose your own adventure type of stuff. Cause those were the things.
Wasn't the original Ultima text based, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the original Ultimas. Yeah, a lot of times I was playing a lot of different games like Wizardry back in the day on the
King's
Apple
Quest,
II. Yeah, King's Quest. Yeah, I mentioned Sierra Online. All those games kind of inspired me to kind of continue to get into games because they're making some great games back then. And I was like, I played them. I love to play King's Quest, right? And I'm like, hey, I want to try to make this myself.
Run north, stop at lake. It's there is just so much that gaming has like brought for me. I'll be honest. Mavis Beacon teaches typing. I was a flunky at, but having to learn how to type fast so I could do text-based games. That was sort of the PowerPoint for me that got me into typing, because Mavis Beacon did not know how to gamify that.
No. And we were using back in the high school, I hate to say this, but I was using regular old typewriters. That's how I learned to type. It was on those old school typewriters.
Same. Old school typewriter, and that's where, my grandma, still he types me letters on, and that's where I learned, back home. If I wasn't on the computer, we had that first dial-up modem. I still remember getting 28 kilobytes per second.
Oh, that was yeah.
I thought I was the god.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, Rampage is one of the classics of monster PvP games, Yeah. So I think that I think there's a lot of cool stuff being built out here, Ken, we're gonna start to wrap up. I've super enjoyed this time. I enjoy every time we get to talk, because we talk on the phone, maybe once a week or so, here and there, traveling. We're trying to do some cool business together as well, which I'm super excited about, and what Manifest is building and Lifted Initiative. But like the open source side of AI, we're gonna try to condense some hot topics into like less than 15 minutes. So because we've had a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff on the open source side where open source AI, open source GPU usage is starting to get limited, and I 20 minutes before our show, I was like, hey, I know you're in California. I don't know if you've seen this Senate Bill 1047, where California is attempting to limit the amount of GPU someone has access to for training models in AI, or having access to the type of AI that they're able to use, because as they're trying to say, having an open source AI, is dangerous in everyone's hand. Having an unbiased AI.
Yeah, I read through the bill, and it's just so all over the place. But one of the things that kind of struck me towards the end of it was it said, of these, you have to, as a developer, you have to figure out if a model is dangerous, and basically say, oh, I'm not going to run that model, right? Well, if you read further down, it says the definition of these dangerous models has to be a model that the GPU cost is $100 million and above. I'm like, okay, well, that probably will never happen with our system.
Yeah. Well, it's either, so the cost of training is $100 million at the current market rate of whatever. So they could say what the market rate is. So it could have cost you $100,000, because you're using distributed compute in less developed countries. Right. I'm not going to say third world countries, because there's some big tech happening in less underdeveloped countries, which is really cool. But so it's at their power usage, which they're using renewables like crazy, or, you know, so their cost is super low, or you're subsidizing the cost because they're using the network and providing compute power. But then they also use they also give a GPU amount usage and stuff like that, like to the 10th decimal place or something like that.
Yeah.
And like, or it could do damage in excess of $500 million, you know, and, or mass casualties. You're like, I don't know how many people have been hurt by the anarchist cookbook, but that's a First Amendment right. Yeah. Anarchist cookbook. And so code is a First Amendment right too. And I got to meet an early cryptographer, you know, from the 90s. Well, he's been a cryptographer since like the 80s and 70s, but like he remembers in the 90s, 128-bit encryption was labeled a munition. And so what they used to do is they would print out that code and have books, and then they would travel outside of the country with it as a book. And like, you know, report it to customs, like, oh, well, I was told this was a munitions. And they're like, no, this is a book. This is written word. You're good. Go on your way. And then the cryptographers would then sit and type it out, retype it all out, you know. And so it seems like we're on another track of, I hate saying Big Brother, you know, trying to limit the access that people have to only what's approved, like open AI, which is not open, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's called closed AI now.
Yeah. And I think one of the great things that, you know, was said, you know, Sam Altman turned himself from a headline to a footnote by making OpenAI closed source. And so we're seeing really amazing projects like Morpheus, 6079, Manifest, Hyperbaric, Hyperbolic, Sapien, Lumerin, that are doing open source and pushing open source AI, you know. Venice, Eric Voorhees, you know, this is how cool the world is today. You know, how big Eric Voorhees is, and I'm sitting and eating barbecue with his dad, you know, in Austin, you know, like, this is where we're at, you know, where we're fighting for access to compute power.
Yeah. And it's just forcing it. And I think the current administration and even Trump is talking about how they realize that AI is innovation, and, you know, and blockchain is innovation, right? And you can't stifle innovation. And if they're trying to stifle it, it just goes offshore, right? I mean, the genie's out of the bottle with all this stuff, especially with blockchain, and they can do all the documentation they want. You know what that just means? I'm going to have to move out of California. You know, I'm going to have to move to the Bahamas or somewhere else, because they're not going to stop me from coding my AI. Of course, my AI is all for good, so it doesn't matter. But people can misuse my tool. It's like trying to regulate a hammer, right? A hammer is used to do nails, but it can also be used to bash somebody's head in, right? Are you going to regulate a hammer because somebody can misuse it, right?
Yeah. Not as intended. But like like people misuse things all the time. Like that's why there is a do not microwave your pet or animal on microwaves now. Yeah. Because people used it. They're like, oh, it's drying my food. I can dry my dog. So now there's literally a warning on microwaves that says do not insert animals.
Yeah. Or foil.
Yeah. And or like I remember like some lady won a court case because she turned on cruise control on her camper and then went and took a nap, like went and laid down and took a nap in her camper, and her camper crashed. And she was like, well, there wasn't something that said I couldn't not do this.
Yeah.
You know, and so you're right. Everything can be misused. You know, a rock can be picked up. But
yeah, and I don't know what they're trying to do with doing that. I mean, government regulation and stuff like that, just like I said, it drives away innovation and tries to stifle innovation. That's all it does. I mean, because, you know, China, you know, they can't control China. China's just going to do it anyway. And so then we're going to be behind the scenes where we can't combat them because we have to worry about all this regulation and what models we're using, but so we can't combat the evil because now we're worried about, it. I don't know, just if you're trying to build stuff in, I guess I can see it a little bit, but at least they're targeting 100 million and above, right? So I don't think they're targeting us little guys, which is great.
That's where it's at now. But
Yeah.
like in the 90s, that bill that was written, the first exception to that rule that had to be made so it could be exported was the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 had more encryption in GPU than what was written by this law, allowed by this law, and it couldn't be exported because it was labeled as a munition. So when the next play item, PlayStation 7 or whatever, or the next there used to be two versions of Netscape, 128 and 64,
Right.
and you had to choose the right one so you weren't violating munitions, armament deals, so there's some interesting pieces there. I want to shout out to everyone that's joined us today. If you're on the Twitter space and you want to come up and quickly ask a question before we wrap this up, I would love to have you come up. Please put in a request, ask Ken a question, or, say something cool, or not, or drop a question in the comments. But you can follow Genius. That is my ask for you guys today. If you give geniusai.ai a follow, and find out what Ken is building, see how you might want to get involved or see what they're building, and if that's something that might be useful for your community or your game. If you're a builder, I want to shout out to all the builders. One of my favorite hashtags that I put out there is builders build. And that is something that we get to really see here at the ground floor, and so Ken, I want to thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah.
This has been overdue for a minute, but it's perfect timing.
Yeah.
So we have something that goes on this show. It has gone on, this is the 668th episode. Every episode, so 667 times so far, we have ended every show with two things: words of wisdom and the greatest worst knock joke on the face of the planet. Don't worry, it's the same joke. I got it. That's handled. But if there's not anyone that wants to come up to ask any last questions or put any questions in the comments, Ken, final thoughts and words of wisdom.
I think that, it was attributed to Einstein, but one of my favorite sayings is insanity. And it's probably not Albert Einstein. It's been kind of shown that it's not possibly him, but still attributed to him anyway. That basically says that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? That's stuck with me since I was a kid. And so he's become one of my favorite heroes for other reasons too. But just that saying alone is led me, because I'm always growing and always learning new stuff, right? And figuring new ways to solve problems and things like that. And I love to do that. But that saying alone has just driven me over the years and allowed me to talk with people and say, look, is it working for you? Right? What you're doing, is it working? Well, Albert Einstein or whoever said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think the government is kind of doing that with what we talked about, where they're trying to regulate stuff and do the same thing over and over again, or, not adopting crypto, and they're kind of getting it, but it's something to live by, right? And just think about every time you do something is like, am I keep doing the same thing? And I keep, if you're trying to break through a wall, it's a different story. But if you're doing exactly the same thing, expecting different results, you gotta look on how to change what you're doing. And I think that's what genius is, right? Is changing the world and changing how to use AI for good and basically, do things like solve, cure cancer, among other things. So,
yeah, that is the classic that everyone uses, and we've seen like folding at home for genome mapping and like eye nerve mapping and everything like that. I've been folding at home for a long time, which is sort of fun, using my compute power to try to do good. I want to bring you expanded really heavily on the saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I love that saying. I've had it for a long time in my repertoire. My words of wisdom are always the same. I've said this 667 times. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us, but my words of wisdom are always the same. A closed mouth cannot be fed, and you cannot feed a closed mouth. Meaning if no one knows you're looking for opportunity can never come a knocking. If opportunity does come knocking and no one answers, it's going to keep on walking. Ken, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on TacoBytes, your daily bite of Degen, episode number 668, live with Genius AI, LLM Me. But we get to end with the greatest, worst knock joke. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Ken, are you ready? Since you are here, you get to be on this knock joke. It is done out of honor for those that have come before us and respect of those that will come after us. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
All right. Knock.
Who's there?